The ninth season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. My guest this week is actually one of my favorite people. Okay, there's my bias. But she's also a very strong, intelligent woman who is in public office and also works with a nonprofit. So Nancy Thompson, Senator Nancy Thompson, welcome.
Thanks, Carol.
It's been around a year since you ended a congressional race in the second district here, and it didn't turn out your way.
No.
Before we get into some of the things, we're looking at things on TV like the Commander-in-Chief, the mythical story about a woman president. You and I have chatted before about women in politics. How are we doing?
Well, I wish we were doing a little better in Nebraska. We have very few women in the legislature still. I just heard a lecture at noontime today about the fact that the United States hasn't really, we're 61st among democracies in the number of women in public office. And that kind of came as a surprise to me. And we really should be doing better. Most countries that are democracies have much stronger numbers, at least to 25%. And the fact that we're not close is kind of disturbing. You know, I'm turning 58 in a week, and I think of the lifetime that I've had the privilege of serving in politics, either as working for someone or being an elected official. And we just haven't made as much progress as I guess I would have thought of 20, 30 years ago.
The one thing I would say, and this is an observation, and it may not be right on or not, but from the outside, at least the women that serve in, let's say, the unicameral, I think are respected, hold their own and then some most of the time. So we certainly have good role models in terms of running for, an office like that. So what do we
What's
need?
missing? I think having younger women who are interested in running, kind of the next field, the bench, coming in, looking at it. I think when I was growing up in the 60s, it was a time when the women's movement was just starting to move, and so my generation was really looking at that in every aspect of society. And I think my generation really was encouraged by older women at the time, and I was always encouraged by men and women to run. So I've had a lot of positive response in terms of the people who got behind me and helped me get where I wanted to go. And I think we got complacent. It's kind of the same discussion we're having about the Supreme Court. Well, there's one woman there. We may have two women there now, but for the fact that over half of our society is women, we haven't really made huge progress in the number of women elected to office, the people who are CEOs of the large corporations. It's kind of like we hit a spot and we really haven't moved from it.
Well, my analysis is, and this is a very simplistic approach, is that we don't play as much golf.
It's the networks.
And we have children. Yes. And if you have a career and you have children, there's not much room to think about anything else, and you don't have time for golf very much.
No,
but I mean,
you're not very good at
the
golf.
The networking is key, and
yes.
I know there are still groups on Saturday morning of guys that are well connected in this community that meet, and it's just guys. And not that there's anything wrong with that. They're male bonding. But I mean, that those things still live, and that's where a lot of decisions and talk is done about who runs and who you'll support. And I don't think it's meant to keep things away from women. It's just that their field of view at that point is just limited to, this guy I know and this guy I know. Now, women, although they're terrific networkers among themselves and they're very supportive of one another, I've found, they don't tend to think in those kinds of power networks.
Well, that's probably true, and they're not in the power network now, so they aren't able to make those
So is that
decisions.
just us whining, or is that a reality?
Well, I think for me, I've always felt I had a power network.
Well, that's good.
Because in a political realm, in a community, lots, men and women, are very active in the community organizations that know how to put a campaign together. So women have been very, very helpful to me in my races as well as men. But I've never felt a lack of power. I've always felt that I knew the people who could make a difference in my community.
Is it harder for women to raise money? And we'll move on to some money issues in the legislature, but women, although they do make all the big acquisitions in a family,
Right.
lots of times, the refrigerator and the car, they often don't have as much to contribute or feel they can't take away from the family
To do this.
to give to.
I don't think
candidates.
money's a barrier.
You don't?
I think that's a common perception. It's never been for me. I've always had what I needed, except in the congressional race, and I was able
You're a
to
Democrat
raise.
running
I'm a
in
Democrat in
Nebraska for a
Nebraska,
congressional
and
seat.
some of those things. But I mean, people did dig deep. We raised $900,000, which I think going into it surprised a lot of people. We didn't raise what we needed to raise to win, and we were pretty far off the mark. Our personal goal was $1.2 million, and we raised $900,000. It obviously wasn't enough to do it. So, but what we were very, we had a good network of people, and as a Democrat in Nebraska, I think we did pretty well. I think it's just getting organized to do it, and doing all the right things that you have to do to raise money, and that's knowing who your power network is, I guess, and
Ladies,
knowing
get a
that
power network.
Yes, you need and the people who can help you do that.
And that doesn't mean that all your support came from women. I know that because
No.
you have worked on political campaigns for years, you had men who trusted your instincts and trusted your record in the legislature and other public service kinds of things you
But I
did.
did do things a little differently as a woman candidate, and I went into the race saying, I want my issues committee to be half women. And traditionally your finance committee wouldn't be that way. All the people that I had support, I consciously made sure that, and I don't know if other candidates think in those terms, but I wanted to make sure that women were making those decisions with me, and they made great decisions for me.
There's one other aspect that I've always wanted to ask you this. You ran against Lee Terry. He was seeking re-election, and you went on the offensive on a number of things, and his campaign. And I don't know what's right or what was perfectly correct in ads or not. I'm not going to get into that, but saying that you were a dirty campaigner, and is it harder to be strong and on the offensive as a woman than it is for a male candidate? Not to do it, but in terms of perceptions.
Oh, I don't know about the perception. I think the difficulty for a campaign like mine was we didn't have the resources to do Nancy the positive and do the strong campaign of comparative ads, which was what they were. None of our ads were asked to be pulled, anything like that, because of factual. I mean, they were all factual. So, but they were strong. They were comparative ads, and what we didn't have the resources to do was to say, who is Nancy Thompson, the state senator, what has she done? Because they didn't have the money to do both. And so I had to make a strategic decision with my campaign staff. Do we do, this is nice Nancy Thompson and lose, or
is
do
this
we
strong,
do
knowledgeable?
strong comparative ads and have a chance at winning with less resources? And so that was totally strategic.
Well, I find these things fascinating as women do get into things, how you approach things. How much is the same as any campaign, and how much is not different because you're a woman, but because of historically perceptions
Right.
and whatnot.
And you do have to be careful because women tend to look too aggressive and
Bitchy is the word often used. I mean, you say that, and I don't like to use that
Right,
word on TV.
right.
But I mean, that's what they say. They use that word for women when they're aggressive, oftentimes, and there's not a comparable word.
for
They're
men.
strong or tough, or
Yeah.
maybe a little mean, but not that.
probably
B
the
word.
thing that on the campaign trail that people would come up after I had the hard-hitting comparative ads on, they'd come up and say, well, gee, you seem a lot nicer in person. And so I think because you're strong in your ads, you're a lot softer as a candidate shaking hands
Well,
or
and you're
talking.
a pretty. You're one of those kind of quiet demeanor. I mean, you're tough when it comes to what you want and what you do in your stands. But I mean, you don't. You're not a loud, brash. You are a gentle woman, like there are gentlemen, so to speak. And I mean, I think that's good. You kind of have it all. Let's talk about elections, though, in terms of when you won't be seeking next year, and that's because of term limits. You will not be seeking re-election to the legislature. And I know that most people in office in the legislature have a strong feeling that term limits is not good for the unicameral because of the institutional memory that just kind of goes down the tubes.
I oppose term limits. Have always stated my opinion on that, and now I'm going to see it firsthand when 20 of us leave at the same time.
That's a lot of knowledge.
It's a lot of people, and not everyone would have run for re-election,
Right.
but you normally don't have that big group leaving at any given time. And we do have people who've dedicated their lives to good government in Nebraska who would have stayed, and I'm really disappointed that they're not going to be able to be there.
Do you think it's perceived, not just in the legislature, but when the voters have the right to do what voters do for whatever purpose, but it's still perceived as the anti-Ernie Chambers constitutional amendment, because, and you'll even see it sometimes in public pulse letters and things, that we had to go this far to get rid of Ernie, and I'm not convinced there isn't a legal way if he gets written in or something that he wouldn't be back.
Well, his constituents should be able to choose whomever they want. That shouldn't be my decision as someone who lives in La Vista or anyone else from the state. They should be able to select who they want. And term limits passed by a very, very small margin this time. And, I'm disappointed that it passed, but because nationally, that trend, the air was coming out of the balloon, and we were probably one of the last places that did that. But I agree with you. I think part of that was Senator Chambers, and part of it was racism, quite frankly. And I think that it's unfortunate that it passed by such a slim margin, because we're always going to second guess whether or not that's really the way we should go, and it'll be very difficult to ever reverse it.
The one thing that has been raised is that one of the concerns, in addition to the loss of that bank of knowledge, is that the bureaucrats and the lobbyists will have a little more influence. And one thing we do worry about, I think, as no matter what they're lobbying for or against, is that the power of the lobbyist versus the power of we individuals that can't go down and watch the legislature and put our 2 cents in. For instance, and this is not, I'm thinking of tobacco and those perceived as bad lobbies, but there's lobbies for everything. So it's not that like they're all bad or whatever, but you know what I'm saying?
I think really the power shift goes to the governor. In terms of balance of power, because we only have a unicameral legislature and we don't have a partisan legislature. And as a result, there's no one speaking for the legislature, and there's no way, without some longer term people in the legislature who understand and know the issues and can get through the bureaucracy. It really favors the governor. It really shifts the balance of power in Nebraska, in my view. Now the lobbyists will be a little more powerful, the bureaucracy
at least for the new senators.
Yeah, will be a little more powerful, but I think the biggest difference will be, and it doesn't matter whether the governor is a Democrat, Republican,
No.
whatever.
And there are better governors than other governors.
Sure.
And it has nothing to do with necessarily.
No, this is not a partisan discussion. It's the fact that the legislature as a branch of government will be a lot weaker. And part of the reason we're different than the other states that have term limited is we don't have 2 houses and we don't have partisanship in our legislature. And I don't ever want to see that happen. I really like the unicameral.
But there are some things that partisanship do, is that you kind of always know where people stand in general. And you get a lay of the land as a layman sitting out there a little bit. Sometimes you don't like the strident
But I think in the
atmosphere.
legislative process for us, the difference will be if the governor disagrees with the legislature. The governor has a public relations division. He's out. He's got a camera following him. There's no spokesperson per se for the legislature. Maybe it's the speaker, but generally
that's not the speaker's job.
No,
technically.
it is not his job,
Literally to run
or
the
her
legislature.
job, which we haven't had a female speaker. But the parties in other legislatures assume that position. So if the governor says, I think everything should be painted blue, and the legislature said, well, I think everything should be painted green, then all you hear about is why it's a good idea to paint it blue, but we don't really have we don't have a public information office, we don't have any place, we don't have a party that's standing up and raising that other point of view. It's kind of a scattered response.
Well, let's get to the unicameral. You're on the Appropriations Committee, as which is a very important committee because you're the ones that decide, at least in lay the sort of the blueprint out of how the money will be spent, and you make you sort of winnow down the hard decisions, hopefully, in the committee process. What are the biggest challenges coming up? I mean, obviously, we're still not out of the economic blues. We've got the high cost of fuel, which affects both the state and its income.
And we really have tremendous issues in terms of health care, that the costs continue to rise. We have a large elderly population. We pay largely through the state budget is where nursing home care is paid for in the state because people can't afford it. They run out of money, and so they go on the Medicaid system. So,
plus Medicaid for the younger and the poor,
and
too.
the very poor.
We're hearing that the Medicaid issue, the money that the state spends and the difference it has to make up with the federal dollars and everything is a huge issue.
It's eating us alive, and that's true of all states. And if the federal government would step up to their responsibility, we'd be able to handle it. But obviously that's not going to happen with all this federal spending that's going on. And so it's all rolling downhill to the states. And we're in a position in our budget where we know if the numbers keep going like they do for these healthcare costs, we aren't going to have any revenue to take care of the things that people have traditionally wanted us to take care of. You know, strong education system, a higher education system, clean water, the things that we do to make sure that people who are in fragile health, whether they're people with disabilities or we have a veterans home, those kinds of things. All of that Medicaid cost is squeezing those other programs.
And because this is considered to be so serious, how do you even begin to attack this? The governor in the past several years has made decisions about Medicare spending allocations, ceilings for, whether, I don't know if you call them floors or ceilings, but depending on how much you make, and you know, they've sort of lowered the income limits, and those cases are going to court. And I mean, where do we, and it won't just be Nebraska, but where do we sort this out of how to prioritize? If the governor sets out the priorities as they normally do and shift the sort of the rules of the game, and you guys talk amongst yourselves, where does the public come in? And there's really not public discourse in general in this country about those kinds of issues. What
well,
happens?
I think a lot of needs to happen at the national level, and part of that will be preventative medicine, things, the way we learn to take care of chronic diseases, how we take care of ourselves, just the massive public health movements that we can have. I mean, just think of how many people have quit smoking in the last few years and how health outcomes will improve because of that. I mean, I think one of the scary things in the legislature that we've been debating is eliminating our motorcycle helmet law. Well, you know, that's going to come at a cost because people who have severe head injuries run out of resources. They may not have long-term care very, very fast. They tend to be young, and we end up taking care of them in the Medicaid system. So there are lots of things that we can do in terms of public health that can shift it, but we also have to look at the bureaucracy of healthcare costs, how much it costs to take care of all of the claims and the forms and the things that we're building into the cost of healthcare. And I think there's some good things that have been happening, some good efforts that have been happening there in recent years. But we have to get our hands around the rising costs of healthcare in this country. I mean, it isn't, I mean, look at 40 years ago, we didn't spend that much of our gross national product as we do now on our healthcare costs.
Part of it is that we can make people live.
People live
and we
a lot
can live
longer.
Better, and then therefore if let's say, the diabetes or chronic health problem doesn't kill them, the cancer will, because they're living longer and they have a better chance of getting all these other things. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I mean, these are actuarial realities that we have to figure out how to deal with
How to
it.
do it. So if we can help people manage their diseases better, not use the expensive parts of the system, be able to, if we can manage the bureaucracy of the healthcare system better, and have some national leadership. I mean, we can't solve all this at the state level. It's really tough. We can do some innovations here, and I think there's some exciting stuff that will be coming down. But as the trends go, that's, getting back to your original question, that's a really tough one. And we're sitting here right at the university, and we're going to look at rising tuitions for our students. That's going to squeeze some people out of being able to go to college. They're just not going to be able to afford it. And we're spending less money as a state, and we're on public education. So higher education is going to be in a real crisis, I think, in coming years if we don't figure out how to manage the rest of our budget.
And certainly the state aid to schools issue, which is ongoing,
Yes.
and with the Omaha Public School District and the throwing down the gauntlet with its proposal to make Omaha one city, one school district. If nothing else, the issues that they're concerned about are real. The equity issues they haven't really decided. The courts haven't, hammered that all out as to what is equity among school districts. But that's not going to go away.
No, and we have a lot of challenges for our schools that if you look back historically, I mean, special education is a big cost to schools. And the thing that you just brought up, we have a lot of children that didn't survive because of various diseases in childhood. And now we're grateful as a society that we have better medicine and better ways of helping those children in infancy. But a lot of them have special needs as they go through life, and our special education programs are there for them, but that's a big chunk of what we're spending now that we didn't spend 20, 30 years ago. And we have lots of new immigrants. And
I was
and
just
not to
going to get to that. No,
Yeah.
don't have to get political about it, but it is a
it's
reality.
fact. It's a fact.
And as long as they want labor at certain financial
Right.
standards to fill certain jobs, that is not going to go away. And that's another issue that the federal government or our lawmakers
Right.
who promised to reform immigration after the Reagan amnesty. That was the great promise. I don't see any of them pointing fingers at themselves for not taking care of their end of the bargain after the Reagan amnesty.
Well, and you've got some pretty differing views on the whole thing. And the fact is we have a huge population that's here, and they're part of our economy. And the flip side of that is, people who feel that they shouldn't be here. And the politicians trying to figure out, dance around in the middle there between what we need in our society and our economy versus how we deal with the fact that some people aren't here illegally.
And
Are here illegally.
And then you marry that or put it alongside the issue of just jobs in general and the changing job picture in this country and people losing opportunities because of outsourcing, which I don't know if that affects Nebraska so much, but ultimately it will. I mean, there are jobs that are done in Nebraska in the mid-level telecommunications, things that can be sent elsewhere, or our wonderful phone network here that allows all the call centers and everything. That could take a hit. So, I mean, these are issues that are all interconnected. And so what else? What other good things do you have to look forward to in your last
In
year?
my last year? Well, I think the school issue, people come up to me and think, that's going to be pretty big. It's very big in my area because Papillion La Vista and Bellevue have an ongoing discussion
Issue about
boundaries.
boundaries.
But it's going to take us a while to get there. We have some leftover things from last year. It's the short session of the legislature. Generally speaking, major system reform is hard to come by, and you have 20 people who are not going to be there the next year. So we all have what would we
So
like
you're
to
a lot
get
of 20
done
lame
before
ducks,
we're
in
20
essence.
lame ducks, and we're 20 people who have maybe one more thing we'd like to get accomplished before we leave, or two or three, or we're looking at those very big things that we've been working on and say, I can't get it done this year. Somebody new is going to have to pick that up.
So, you're talking about potentially an incredibly, whipping and gnashing of teeth session in terms of not just how you feel all about it, but people that have all these interests in the state
And we're going to start off with, if the speaker asked senators who had some very controversial issues at the end of last session to hold those off to the beginning of the session. So it's kind of coming back to some very stressful days to start with if he holds to that calendar. So we'll all be in a really foul mood by February. By February, by the time we get through those that are the perennial controversial issues that come up year after year after year, that tend to have long, extended debates. So by the time we get to the new stuff, we'll be we could be a little cranky.
I should mention we're towards the end of the show that you are executive director of Big Brothers Big Sisters here in Omaha, and that's you've always been involved in public service, and that is the kind of organization that is trying to fill gaps in the societal complexities we have, the societal deficits. So you're seeing the needs of a public from a different viewpoint, but it all meshes together.
It does. The big issues that we're seeing, some new trends in education, for example. A report came out this summer in Nebraska that we have more children who aren't in school, they're not working, and a greater number of high school dropouts. We know that there are more children in poverty. We know that the children of the new immigrants are less likely to be able to go on to college. All of those things mentoring can play a role in, because our mentors mentor children largely from single parent families, the families who come to us. But the outcomes for them are they stay in school, they're less likely to miss school. So we can impact those things that we're worrying about at the legislative level on what about all the kids who are dropping out. We can impact that from the nonprofit side with just a little bit of money to be able to put the matches together and keep the kids safe and do all the things that we do. But we can impact school attendance, we can impact teen pregnancy, we impact the kids who stay away from drugs and alcohol. All of that's just solid research behind it. So it's exciting for me to be able to go from the public policy kinds of things that I've worked on from the state level when all the things go wrong and we have to figure out how we're going to deal with it, to the prevention side where with just a little bit of effort and some great volunteers, good things happen to kids.
Well, I want to thank you so much, and I wish you all the best this next legislative session, and every state senator. And we all need to do our part to get involved and let you know where we think the priority should be. Thank you, Nancy Thompson, and thank you for joining us this week on Consider This. See you next week.
Thanks.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 9th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.